So that's a natural transition then to maybe the next question. So yes, we do need to use it because it helps us in our teaching. It is a tool that clarifies, maybe it is a tool that maybe connects different ideas for the students. So when we're thinking of the type of technology, and again, it could be a whiteboard or it could be a webcam, any of those kind of things, what makes something effective in the classroom? So which type or what are some effective uses? We answered this a little bit, but maybe we could get a little bit more specific in different types of technology. What should we, or how should we maybe use those to be effective?
I think there's a global understanding maybe about effective use of technology takes the content further and takes the learner with them. So it expands their understanding. It expands, I think of a really simple example is why would you use video in an elementary school classroom? These kids watch movies, they watch video all the time. Why would I do that? Well, because if you've got students who've never been to the beach and they can see water and hear it, it's an experience they've not had, and you can put it into context of what you're working on in your science lesson, or a point. You can give them a point of reference, a visual and a sound that goes with a story. It enhances the learning you're doing. It enhances the content you're giving them. It's not just pure entertainment. And I think there's a balance in when do we want to entertain our students and when do we want to use technology to move the learning forward. Those are the two, I think, big pictures of technology in a classroom. And sometimes what we think is moving content forward really ends up just being entertainment. Like, we have to really be picky and prioritize what we choose as educators to put in front of them.
Yeah, so it moves it for, like, this is a big problem in preaching sometimes, is when you've heard a really good joke and you know that that this would bring the congregation in. And so you tell the joke, but it really has nothing to do with your message, but they like you a little bit more. But then you realize that didn't really clarify. It wasn't, your main point is to preach this message. And then you realize that was actually more distracting than it was clarifying. Right. Mm-hmm. And that can happen with technology. Yeah.
Well, and like the joke, our students can remember the technology and not what the point of the lesson was about.
Yeah.
And I like what Aaron said earlier, that you match the technology to the outcomes and the assessment that the goals that you're trying to establish for that session or for that unit. And so being wise and discerning in the use of technology as it's matching and meeting the goals that you're trying to have your students accomplish, I think that's kind of the key in that respect. For example, this last year I read an article, and I hadn't thought about it this way, but just simple PowerPoint. We lecture, we use PowerPoint, so we have slides, and so a few years ago, I was working with a different kind of strategy for less is more. So fewer slides, fewer words on a slide, larger font size, adding a graphic to go with it. So you have that kind of visual to go with the text. And so some of that coming out of some, psychology studies and those kinds of things. But then I read another article, and it was saying that especially because of attention spans, and especially where our students are at today, that for every 2 slides, you should insert a question and actually put the question on the slide. And so that you're engaging your students, because if you're just doing a straight lecture for 50 minutes and you're throwing up, 40 or 50 slides, you've lost your students at slide number 2. So the idea is that you've got to get them, because we're kind of habitual creatures like that, because we sit down in front of Netflix, we zone out. And all of a sudden, an hour and a half later, okay, I guess I'll move on to the next show. And so binge watching has just killed us in many respects educationally for learning things, because we just move from one sequence to the next without thinking or processing or reflecting and those kinds of things. So it kind of made me take stock of, okay, the way that I'm integrating technology into the goals and what I want them to learn for that session and how I want them to reflect, interact with one another, myself, those kinds of things are key markers for that.
Yeah, Sam, that's a great point in that I can compartmentalize a little bit where technology comes into teaching. Technology can be part of the delivery of content. It's also part of the pedagogy of the teaching strategies. And what you were talking about there is blending those two, right? It's a couple of slides and then students are engaged. There's an activity, they're doing something with it. And when you can blur those segments of teaching across a class period with technology, rather than just doing content delivery with technology and then doing something else, but you have them wove together, it's going to be more logical or tight for the students and fit all together. You also then use technology for students when you assess them. So how they're going to demonstrate what they've learned. And so as you think about using the tools of technology, whether it is for delivering content, whether it is for an engaging teaching strategy, or whether it's a student assessment, you're making those decisions based on your outcomes and your objectives all along the way. It's not just in a box over here and a box over there. And again, that goes where using technology is not doesn't just make it a great lesson. I could have 50 minutes of PowerPoint slides with 1 million words on each of the slides, and that's not effective teaching. I'm using technology, but it doesn't engage students. And so intentionally inserting those breaks and things like that. And we'll talk maybe more of how to do that in a voice thread or a video or a PowerPoint when we get to the next question.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like if we go back to what we talked about in a different session, like the flipped classroom idea, is it the best use of my students' time and engagement for me to show the 3 videos that I want them to discuss in class and lose all that instructional time of discussion versus, again, having them watch those outside and coming back ready to talk about them? It's a lesson I had to learn when I first moved up to higher ed is, hey, that's kind of a lousy use of all of our times to show all those videos in class. Let's flip that, put them out into their time to watch them, come back in, and then I get that really strong discussion. So we have different reasons to use technology, but we also have to think about that instructional space and what's the priority based on our outcomes and our content that we need. What's the most important use of that instructional space that we have with them? Is it watching the video or talking about the video and going from there?
Yeah,
we've focused all our technology talk so far on the classroom, but there's another side of it. An effective use of technology is discovery learning. So we're teaching our students how to use electronic research tools, things that are online, whether it's library databases or even the proper way to Google search and to evaluate websites, those kinds of things, so that instead of working, coming down to converging to some kind of right idea, instead pushing them out into a world of exploring and how to do it well, not just how to Google, but how to evaluate and discern the technology they use.
Yeah. You want to give students the tools to expand their own curiosity. If you just say, go find it, they might be misdirected and, not being very effective with their time or where they're looking. But if you can give them some guideposts along the way, here's where you can look for this, or here's a way to do this, or here's how you can use this source to get to the next source. If we can help them in that discovery learning, it just expands their curiosity and they'll end in a different place than if they're just trying to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, for me, one of the coolest things is when a student sends you a YouTube clip. It's like, hey, this, what we talked about in class reminded me of this. And then they will send you just a song or a short little clip about something. It's like, yes, they made the connection and they're sharing it with all of us. Yeah. So this is the question. So what are effective? And I think we also sort of mixed with this ineffective things that are ineffective, and a lot of that probably comes down to not using the medium, whatever it is, whether it's PowerPoint, Keynote, video type things, effectively, right? Because all of those are maybe art forms. And if we don't know how to use them well, it is more distracting than clarifying. And I really think that, because right now, because of the printing press, the printing press is what was that the 1400s? I think we have history people here, 15th century, right?
1456. 96.
Oh, sweet. Yes, I got the decade right. So I'm going to call that a win. But you know how that changed everything, because now everybody could write and you could publish basically. And that was maybe the biggest technological event in our, in history, or one of them. And a lot of people say the internet is almost as revolutionary as the printing press. And I think one of the things with that is the ability to do video and make video part of the experience. And I really think that in the future, maybe not that far away, is that making videos will be on par with academic writing, that this will be the way that we do research and present research, is through video. And so it is an art form probably that we need to help students with, and maybe how to even do academic videos. Is that crazy, or is that?
It's TED Talks.
Yeah.
TED Talks, exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking, because I agree. I think we're looking at new dynamics coming in. I've been doing a lot of reading on gamification and learning as instructional tools, and there's one researcher said gamification won't make bad content better, and I sort of like to apply that to technology. Technology won't make bad content better. Your content has to be strong and has to be solid, and you have to be comfortable and solid in the content you're handing out, so in order for it to be meaningful to students. So taking poorly constructed content and throwing it up on a PowerPoint or doing it in a video won't make it better. And I think that's when I think about technology, one more aspect is, what am I presenting? Am I presenting worthy, important, prioritized content that matches my outcomes and what I'm going to assess? So oftentimes people go, oh, I'm not super good at this. I'll throw up a video and I'll do this. And again, it won't make bad content better. So kind of keeping that in mind along the way.
It's kind of only amplifying the badness of the bad content. Right?
Yes.
Well, and it's an interesting point that you made, Kent, because when you were making that comment, I was reflecting back to some comments that Neil Postman made, as well as thinking through like Nicholas Carr, who I'm a huge fan of as well. And so we felt that when the computer was invented, that it would eradicate all writing. What it actually did was up publishing exponentially more than it had ever been at any time in history. And so the video question is still yet to be determined. And I'm leaning more on Nicholas Carr, because the overwhelming infusion or overwhelming kind of engagement that we have with technology can lead us away from technology in some capacity, so that less is actually more rather than a full engagement. So I think bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that the use of technology, we neither take utopias nor dystopias kind of positions with it. And certainly as believers, we have to use it more discerning, in a more discerning and wise way. Certainly we see that God has used technology for his redemptive purposes. For example, no one knew what an ark was. And so
exactly, yeah,
it was technology that was used for God's redemptive purposes. And so we look at the cross itself, and the cross itself was in a technological advancement towards human suffering and cruelty, but it was a technological advancement. But God used that technology for his redemptive purposes, and so I think we have to bear that in mind. That where we're engaging our students with our outcomes, with our goals, with our assessing pieces, engagement in the classroom, that we're using technology in a way that is balanced. And we bring that kind of discernment and that wisdom to the use with technology. Just doing an information dump truck, backing it up, whether you're doing it with PowerPoints or videos or reading or whatever, it kind of misses the point. And so, I'm a huge Howard Hendricks fan, so we teach for transformation, and that's kind of the goal, and so that's our goal. So, and we have to, everything that we do, technology included, has to be considered in that kind of discerning, wise sort of inclusion in the way in which we teach.
And we're preparing our students for a technological world that doesn't exist yet. 5 years from now, technological expectations and advancements won't be what they are now. And we talk about that a lot in our ed classes as we're preparing future kinder and first grade teachers. When they get their kinders and first graders in class, those kids are going to be doing jobs that don't exist when they finish with school. And so providing students with the tools and as Sam said, the discernment, the ability to look at something and see value and how it can be used in a redemptive purpose, that's what we should be modeling as we teach. And so we need to, even as what we expect from our students, we need to have them writing, we need to have them making videos, we need to have them doing lots of these different things, because their future depends on their ability to do a wide range, or to use a wide range of mediums to communicate effectively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think another biblical example, because I don't want Sam to be the only one to mention the Bible, so I'm going to do a Jesus juke and say, yeah, but like when you look at the tabernacle, when God is giving the directions for what the tabernacle is supposed to look like, and Aaron was a priest in there, so that's a good connection here. But how much gold was used and how beautiful the experience was, right? The whole aesthetic, because God could have just been very practical and said, hey, just put a tent up and then do whatever. But there is incredible detail on just the beauty of the place. And so when you think of like effective technology, if the tabernacle was a piece of technology, God didn't want it only to be functional. He wanted it to be beautiful. He wanted it to be really kind of breathtaking. Should we have that attitude when we are using technology too? Should we try to do it the best that we can?
That's a loaded question, because it can be a time drain. When you get into some of the bells and the whistles of some of the programs that you're using, I refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist. Teaching has cured me of some of my perfectionist tendencies. And if I still had those perfectionist tendencies in designing some of the content or the activities that I have, I would waste a lot of time. I think you need to be able to do the best that you can with the time and the resources that you can, but also still maintain that balance. Just as I always talk, we binge watch Netflix. When you get into technological things, you can just see time disappear. And so you need to do it well. You need to hone your craft. You need to be a professional teacher and produce professional work and create professional experiences for your students, but you can't let it monopolize the entirety of your existence.
That's good.
That's a good point, Aaron. And I would kind of just add on to that, no technology will ever replace the relationship that we have with our students. And so, making sure that we're building the kind of connections with our students that really have a lasting impact far beyond any kind of whiz-bang PowerPoint video, whatever kinds of engagement we can put together for students, that they know that we love them, we care about them, we want them to grow in Christ in the way that they're learning and they're engaging with their studies, et cetera, et cetera. So, the relational dynamics, and technology can actually help supplement that. It doesn't replace it, but it can supplement it.
Yeah, that's good. I think I really like Jen's comment, that content is king, kind of like Pixar says, story is king. We're here to tell a story. We're not here to wow people with special effects. That's kind of what Peter Jackson in Lord of the Rings, they did some incredible special effects, but the way he uses this is just to support the story. If people ever get distracted by, how did they do that? We are not using it correctly. And I think that's the same thing with technology. It's not there to overwhelm our content. It's there to support it. And if we don't do it well, sometimes that could be confusing or distracting. And so we always want to be clarifying this, right? So